Alrighty, welcome back everyone. It's Garlaanx here bringing you a new Diablo 4 video. And I know I'm a little late with this video, but I wanted to have a record of it on my channel. So Season 1 is in full swing, and it is the season of the Malignant. So there are 32 total Malignant's hearts. It's going to be a little quick video. We're going to, just go through them really quickly here. So there are 4 types of hearts. You have the Vicious, the Brutal, the Devious, and then the Wrathful is your most powerful. So, essentially, you have 3 slots of jewelry. You have 2 rings and 1 amulet. These can only go in those slots. So, it's basically RNG on top of RNG. If you get a best slotted amulet, or best rolled amulet, rather, and it has the wrong slot, well, you're SOL because you can't change the slots. So, keep on grinding, boys. Let's go ahead and just jump into all the hearts. So the general hearts here, we have the Picana, which is Vicious. Critical strikes electrically charge the enemy, causing lightning to arc between them. It's not really that great, to be honest. The damage isn't scaling high enough to be worthwhile. The Dark Dance is a Vicious. Every 5 seconds while above 60% life score, core skills cost life instead of your primary resources. Skills that consume life deal 20% increased damage. It has a place in the game on certain class and certain builds. Tempting Fate, you gain 40 to 60% critical strike damage, but your non-critical strikes deal 20 to 15% less damage. So a lot of builds are using this, especially builds that have pretty much 100% crit rate, crit chance. You're just gaining another 40 to 60% critical strike damage. The Lion Heart, you gain 10 barrier generation, and then you heal 3 to 7 life per second. Not that great. Revenge is 10 to 20% of incoming damage is instead suppressed. When you use a defense, subterfuge, or macabre skill, all suppressed damage is amplified by 250% and explodes, dealing up to X amount of fire damage to enemies. There are very specific niche builds that have been trying this out and playing around with it. But again, you only get 3 slots, so you essentially have to pick the 3 best Malignant hearts for your build. The Prudent Heart, you become immune for 2 to 4 seconds after you lose more than 20% life in a single hit, and it has a cooldown, internal cooldown on it. So when you're pushing higher tier content and you're more spec'd for damage than damage resistance, you may just put this heart on a select piece of gear just to get the immunity. Determination, resource draining effects are 40 to 50% less effective. In addition, you gain resource generation. Again, it's actually a really good heart. Unfortunately, there's just better ones to use. Retaliation, deal X amount of fire damage to surrounding enemies whenever a crowd control effect is removed from you. Even in PvP, it's not good. It's not good enough to use to sacrifice a slot. The Calculated, after spending 150 to 200 of your primary resource, your next attack stuns enemies for 2 seconds. Just horrible, unfortunately. Let's get into the 3 generalized big boys here. So the Malignant Pack. Cycle through a Malignant bonus every 20 kills. You either gain attack speed, you get the effect to fully restore your primary resource, or every X amount of seconds you gain barrier absorbing X amount of damage. So a lot of people were looking at this as one of the go-tos. Unfortunately, on some builds, the other hearts are too good. So if you can squeeze this one in, especially if you're playing a resource heavy build, because you have an X amount of chance to fully restore your primary resource. The problem is that it cycles every 20 kills. So you're going to cycle through all 3 of them, and before you get back to that devious one, most people have a good enough resource generation at end game that unfortunately this heart kind of falls off. Creeping Death, your damage over time effects are increased by 30 to 40% for each different crowd control effect on the target. So that's slow, stun, chill, etc. Unstoppable monsters and staggered bosses instead take X amount of increased damage from your DOTs. So I play a Necromancer main. I used this for a while, but then you slowly just upgrade from it. It's good for the leveling process. It's good for early nightmare clears. But the DOT damage on a Shadow Necro, for instance, is not where the bread and butter is coming from. It's coming from that key passive of Shadow Blight. So your DOT damage is kind of irrelevant as you get closer to endgame. Now we have the Barber, which is just extremely overpowered, broken in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if they adjust it and or nerf it a little bit. Critical strikes and all subsequential damage within X amount of seconds is absorbed by your target. Then the absorbed damage erupts onto surrounding enemies. Stored damage is increased by X% per second. So essentially this will trigger every time you crit. It sucks all the damage. You stop doing damage, it sucks all the damage in. Once that timer runs out, it just AoEs that damage on everything. The Barber is by far probably the best Malignant heart in the game right now currently, unless they do adjust it / nerf it. But like right now, currently, I believe I'm level 60 in the season, and I'm able to clear Nightmare 30 dungeons. So those mobs are substantially higher than me, but my damage output is so high because of the Barber that I'm still able to clear that content. So I can see them definitely nerfing this or adjusting it a little bit before the season ends, if not within this next upcoming patch. So those are all the generalized Malignant hearts. Let's go into the class-specific ones here. Barbarian is focused rage. After spending X amount of fury within 2 seconds, your next non-basic skill's critical strike chance is increased by 20 to 30. Resurgent life. While below X amount of health, you receive X amount of more healing. Punishing speed. Your skills have a 20 to 30% chance to knock down all enemies. 1.5 seconds, or I'm sorry, 1.25 seconds, that skill's attack speed is higher than 35 to 20%. Ignoring pain. Incoming damage has a X amount of percent to be ignored and instead heals you for X amount. I only play the Necro guys, so I'm not going into depth about these. The Druid, the Moon Rage, kills have a X amount of chance to summon a Wolf Companion for X amount of seconds. In addition, you gain +3 to your wolves. The Agitated Winds. When X amount of close enemies, automatically cast Cyclone Armor, and then it has an internal cooldown. Inexorable. Up to X amount of distant enemies are pulled toward you while you have an ultimate skill active. The Unconstrained Beast is the Druid Wrathful. When you are hit with a stun, freeze, knockdown effect, there is a X amount of chance to automatically activate Grizzly Rage. Again, sorry guys, I only play Necromancer. I don't know all the skills of all the other classes right now. The Necromancer. The Sacrilegious. Walking near a corpse automatically activates an equipped corpse skill every second, dealing X amount of percent damage, reduced damage. It's amazing. Okay, nothing really needs to be said about it. It's amazing. The Decrepit Aura. When at least X amount of enemies are near you, gain an aura that automatically curses surrounding enemies with Decrepify for X amount of seconds. Again, fantastic heart. And I believe you can get this down to 0 enemies, so you just have 100% uptime. But your goal is to at least have 1 enemy. That way, when you're in a boss fight, you can still have Decrepify being auto-cast, essentially. Frozen Tear is just god-awful. You never want to be fearing mobs in a game where you want to slaughter everything as quickly as possible. Up to an X amount of percent chance of inflicting fear for 2.5 seconds. Feared enemies are chilled for 20% or X amount of percent every second. So, if you guys haven't played the Necro yet, there are certain uniques that have chilled and frozen damage on it. I can see where Blizzard they wanted to make some kind of niche build revolving around cold damage with the Necro, and it's just not there, unfortunately. It needs a lot of work. They're going to have to make significant changes to how that works and the gear and everything. And it's not going to happen for Season 1, so Frozen Tear is just a wasted heart, in my opinion. The Great Feast. This is another one of those hearts that is actually really, really good if you can fit it in to your build, etc. Specifically for the Necromancer, we're basically using the Barber, Sacrilegious, and Decrepify. Or the Decrepit Aura, rather. Now, once you get closer to endgame, you can probably sacrifice the Decrepit Aura, because that's just being lazy, okay? You can manually cast all your corpse skills, or I'm sorry, the Sacrilegious. You're going to keep the Decrepit one for the auto cast, but realistically, you can sacrifice one or the other. The Sacrilegious one is you're just being lazy. Like, corpse skills will automatically cast, right? You're just being lazy. You can manually cast them. And the same thing goes about Decrepify. You can manually cast it. There are pros and cons to each. We're not going to get into Necromancer stuff. This is just a Malignant Heart video. But the point is, the Great Feast, if you're playing a minion build and you have high enough resource generation, then your minions are gaining, you know, X amount of increased damage. It's draining your essence for X amount of seconds per minion for increased damage. However, if you're playing a sacrificial build where you have no minions, you yourself just gain that bonus, that thought damage bonus. I think this goes up to like 95% on a maxed out heart, on a tier 5 heart. I think it goes to 95, maybe even 100% increased damage. So depending on the build that you're playing and what your resource generation is, that's a significant multiplier. So you can't really dismiss that. Alright, let's get down here. The Rogue, Cluster Munitions. Lucky hit, you have up to a X amount of percent chance to launch 3 stun grenades that deal X amount of physical damage and stuns for X amount of seconds. Trickery, when you use a subterfuge skill, leave behind an unstable shadow decoy trap that taunts enemies. The shadow decoy trap will explode after X amount of seconds, dealing X amount of shadow damage, and then it has an internal cooldown. The Clip Shot, lucky hit chance, up to an X amount of chance for your Cutthroat skills to slow by X% for 3 seconds, and your Marksman skills knock back enemies. The Rogue specific, Wrathful Heart, the Vow, Apothecary. Your attacks have a X amount of percent chance to apply all imbuement effects for X amount of normal potency. And then finally we come to the Sorcerer here. Shout out, they threw in Tal Rasha. Good, nice little flashback there. So, for each unique element you deal damage with, you deal X amount of percent increased damage for X amount of seconds. Spell Breaking, after taking elemental damage, which is basically all the time in endgame, gain X amount of percent resistance to that element. The problem is that resistance is broke and they don't plan on fixing it to Season 2 or Season 3. I don't know how resistances are not currently working in the base game, and we have to wait almost a year before they fix resistance, but hey, this might actually be good for sorcerers when resistance actually works. Spite. When you're afflicted with a CC effect, there's an X amount of percent of chance that the same enemy and enemies around you are also afflicted with the same effect. So this is interesting. So like if you get stunned or frozen, for instance, in endgame, there's a percentile chance that you're going to pass that on to enemies. That's not bad. Omnipower, which is the Wrathful for Sorcerer. Core skills that launch a projectile consume all of your mana. For every X amount of extra mana consumed, you launch a additional projectile and the damage is increased by X%. There you have, guys. Season 1, that is all 32 Malignant Hearts. Again, I know this video is a little late, but I wanted to have it on the channel for the archives. So, that's all 32 Malignant Hearts. I've heard rumors that once Season 1 is over that nothing carries over to the Eternal Realm, so I don't really necessarily agree with that. Like, if you're going to add stuff into the seasons, once the season's over, it should just be then added to the Eternal Realm forever. Why are you going to waste all that development time on all of this stuff during seasons and then it just be gone forever? I don't understand. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe they changed their mind, but from what I've read, from what I've seen, what I've been told, all of these Malignant Hearts and everything from Season 1, when the season's over and you transfer your character to the Eternal Realm, all that Season 1 stuff's gone. So, whether you're playing a specific build based on these Malignant Hearts, when you go to the Eternal Realm, you're probably going to have to redo and modify your build because you're not going to be relying on these hearts anymore. So, hopefully they change that. That's all I got for you folks today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. It's a little longer than I anticipated, but again, it's a little late. We're a couple weeks into the season already, but I wanted to have this on there for the archives of content. I will have Malignant Heart guides, as well as the Malignant Tunnel guides and all that stuff coming as well. So, hopefully in the next few days. That's all I got for you. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and leave them below. I'll see you guys real soon.